A weathered limestone threshold rests beneath the entrance of an ancient cave overlooking the cliffs near the Dead Sea. Its surface is rough beneath centuries of wind-driven sand. Thin fractures spread across the pale stone like silent lines on an old map, while grains of desert dust settle into every crack as the morning sun climbs above the horizon. Nothing about the threshold appears remarkable at first glance. Pilgrims have crossed similar stones for thousands of years without stopping to think about what might have been carried beyond them. Yet this single piece of carved limestone stands at the entrance to one of history's most significant discoveries, a place where forgotten writings waited in complete darkness until the modern world was finally ready to uncover them. Among those writings was a text that had almost disappeared from history, the Book of Enoch. For centuries, the Book of Enoch stood outside the collection of books recognized by most Jewish and Christian communities. While it continued to be preserved in the Ethiopian tradition, it gradually disappeared from widespread use elsewhere, leaving generations unaware that it had once circulated alongside other ancient religious writings. By the 4th century, influential church leaders were helping define which books would be read publicly in churches and which would not. As those decisions shaped the biblical canon, Enoch faded from much of the religious world. The result was simple: most people stopped reading it. Many never knew it existed. Everything changed in the middle of the 20th century, when archaeologists and Bedouin shepherds uncovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in caves near Qumran. Hidden inside clay jars were manuscripts that had remained untouched for nearly 2,000 years. Among them were fragments of the Book of Enoch, written in Aramaic, proving that the work was far older than many scholars had previously believed. Those fragments transformed the discussion overnight. They showed that Enoch was already respected by certain Jewish communities long before the birth of Christianity. Suddenly, a book that many assumed belonged only to later tradition was standing beside some of the oldest biblical manuscripts ever discovered. At the center of the Book of Enoch is an extraordinary claim. It describes a world moving according to an appointed order established by the Creator, where time itself unfolds according to fixed boundaries that humanity cannot alter. The text repeatedly urges its readers to pay attention to patterns, seasons, signs, and the moral choices that shape civilization. Whether one approaches these writings as sacred history, ancient literature, or historical testimony, the message remains remarkably consistent. Human beings are warned not simply about future events, but about becoming blind to the steady progression of time itself. In the next several minutes, you'll see what the text says, what ancient manuscripts preserve, and why this remarkable book continued to capture attention long after many communities stopped reading it. If ancient manuscripts and forgotten chapters of history fascinate you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what was removed from Scripture and what survived the passage of time. The investigation begins with a simple question that historians, archaeologists, and readers continue to explore. What exactly did the Book of Enoch preserve that made it endure across centuries, deserts, forgotten languages, and hidden caves, waiting patiently until the modern world opened the stone entrance once again? But here's what makes this stranger. The rediscovery of the Book of Enoch did not begin with the Dead Sea Scrolls alone. Long before the caves of Qumran attracted the attention of archaeologists, travelers returning from the Ethiopian highlands had already reported the existence of complete manuscripts containing a book that much of Europe believed had vanished forever. During the late 18th century, Scottish explorer James Bruce brought several Ge'ez manuscripts of the Book of Enoch back from Ethiopia, surprising scholars who had known the text mainly through scattered quotations preserved by early Christian writers. For generations, many assumed those quotations represented a lost work that would never be recovered. Instead, complete copies had survived in a living manuscript tradition, carefully copied by scribes who continued preserving the text century after century. The surprise did not end there. As linguists compared the Ethiopian manuscripts with quotations found in the writings of early Christian authors, remarkable patterns began to emerge. The wording often matched far more closely than many expected. Later, the Aramaic fragments discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed that substantial portions of the Ethiopian text reflected traditions already circulating during the Second Temple period. This did not settle every debate about the book's history or composition, but it demonstrated that its roots reached much deeper into antiquity than many had assumed. The Book of Enoch was no recent invention. It belonged to an intellectual and religious world that existed centuries before the New Testament was written, and this is where it gets disturbing. The book repeatedly returns to one central warning. Humanity often ignores gradual change because it expects catastrophe to arrive without warning. Instead, Enoch describes corruption spreading little by little, generation after generation, until people accept as normal what earlier generations would have recognized as dangerous. The text speaks about justice being abandoned, truth becoming difficult to recognize, and human ambition replacing reverence for divine order. These themes are presented not as isolated events, but as a continuous pattern unfolding across history. Whether readers understand these passages spiritually, historically, or symbolically, they are confronted with the same uncomfortable possibility that decline rarely announces itself with dramatic signs. It advances quietly, while ordinary life continues. What we're looking at breaks into 5 major parts. The opening chapters introduce Enoch and describe his calling to witness heavenly realities. The next section focuses on the Watchers, heavenly beings whose rebellion brings disorder into the human world and whose actions introduce violence, exploitation, and forbidden knowledge. A third section records visions concerning judgment, accountability, and the future restoration of creation. The fourth presents detailed descriptions of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, emphasizing that the heavens operate according to fixed laws established by the Creator. The final portion contains exhortations directed toward future generations, urging them to remain faithful despite living through periods of widespread moral confusion. Read together. These sections form a unified message centered on order, responsibility, and the certainty that history unfolds according to a design greater than human power. For many readers today, the lasting influence of the Book of Enoch does not depend solely on whether every detail can be historically verified. Its importance lies in the fact that ancient communities considered these writings worthy of preserving across languages, cultures, and centuries. From fragile parchment copied in Ethiopian monasteries to weathered Aramaic fragments hidden inside desert caves, the surviving manuscripts testify that this text refused to disappear. Each discovery has added another piece to the historical puzzle, inviting modern readers to examine one of the most influential ancient works that existed alongside the world from which the Bible itself emerged. Here's what the translators left out. In several places, modern readers encounter brief phrases that seem straightforward, yet the ancient wording often carries a broader sense than a simple translation can express. One recurring expression speaks of the appointed times established from the beginning. In the surviving Ge'ez manuscripts, supported in part by the older Aramaic fragments from Qumran, the language emphasizes fixed seasons, measured boundaries, and an ordered sequence that cannot be changed by human decision. Rather than presenting time as random or directionless, the text portrays creation itself as operating according to an established design. That emphasis becomes easy to overlook when individual phrases are read in isolation, because the larger pattern only becomes clear after the different sections of the book are considered together. The suppression starts at the centuries, when communities across the Mediterranean gradually defined which writings would be copied, read publicly, and preserved as authoritative scripture. By the 4th century, influential bishops were shaping formal collections of biblical books for their churches. Later councils and regional traditions reinforced those decisions, while texts outside the accepted canon were copied less frequently in many parts of the Christian world. The Book of Enoch followed a different path. It remained part of the biblical tradition within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, where generations of scribes continued producing careful manuscript copies. Elsewhere, however, surviving manuscripts became increasingly rare. This was not the disappearance of a single document overnight. It was the slow result of changing religious priorities, language barriers, and the practical reality that manuscripts survive only when communities continue copying them by hand. Now, here's where it gets active. Even in recent years, the Book of Enoch has attracted renewed attention through advances in digital imaging, manuscript preservation, and archaeological research. High-resolution photography now allows scholars to examine damaged parchment in remarkable detail, recovering letters that once seemed permanently lost. Universities, museums, and research libraries continue digitizing fragile manuscripts so they can be compared across continents without risking further damage to the originals. Every newly photographed fragment, every improved transcription, and every refined translation adds another small piece to a puzzle that has occupied historians for generations. Rather than closing the discussion, modern technology has expanded it, allowing ancient texts to be studied with a level of precision impossible only a few decades ago. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying the Book of Enoch provides a hidden calendar that predicts the exact date of future world events. But what the text describes, when you look at it carefully, matches a much broader concern with order, accountability, and the steady progression of history according to divine purpose. Its repeated focus on measured seasons, moral responsibility, and the consequences of human choices encourages readers to think beyond dramatic predictions. The warning is not that people will fail because they lack information. The warning is that they will possess knowledge, yet ignore the pattern unfolding before them until its consequences become impossible to escape. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. If ancient Jewish communities preserved the Book of Enoch alongside other respected writings, if complete manuscripts survived for centuries within the Ethiopian tradition, if the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed that substantial portions of the text existed long before the Christian era, and if modern scholarship continues to study these manuscripts with increasing precision, then the Book of Enoch occupies a significant place in the history of biblical literature. It remains an extraordinary witness to the religious world that shaped the beliefs, expectations, and questions of countless generations. Its pages continue to invite careful reading, not because they provide easy answers, but because they preserve a voice from antiquity that history nearly allowed the wider world to forget. The deeper you move into the Book of Enoch, the more its attention shifts away from dramatic events and toward patterns that repeat across generations. Enoch is shown observing the movements of the heavens with extraordinary precision. The rising of the sun, the changing phases of the moon, the sequence of the seasons, and the order of the stars are all described as parts of a system established by the Creator long before humanity appeared. Nothing in these passages suggests randomness. Every cycle has a boundary. Every boundary has a purpose. The message is consistent throughout the text. When creation follows its appointed order, harmony exists. When human beings reject that order, disorder spreads, not only through society, but through every relationship built upon truth, justice, and responsibility. This contrast becomes one of the strongest themes running through the entire book. Enoch repeatedly presents knowledge as something carrying enormous responsibility. The text distinguishes between wisdom that leads people toward righteousness and knowledge that is pursued without moral restraint. According to its account, corruption begins when power is separated from accountability. Skills that could benefit humanity instead become tools for violence, pride, exploitation, and domination. The warning is not directed against learning itself. Instead, it questions what happens when knowledge grows faster than character. That concern feels remarkably familiar even in the modern world. Every generation develops new abilities capable of improving human life. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates that technological progress alone cannot prevent injustice. The Book of Enoch insists that wisdom and morality must advance together, or civilization eventually begins to undermine itself from within. Another striking feature of the book is its view of history. Rather than describing isolated moments disconnected from one another, it presents humanity as participating in a continuous moral journey, stretching from one generation to the next. Decisions made by one age influence the lives of those who follow. Acts of faithfulness create foundations that later generations inherit. Acts of corruption leave burdens that future societies struggle to overcome. In this way, Enoch describes history less as a collection of unrelated events and more as an unfolding record in which every generation contributes another chapter. Readers are therefore encouraged to think beyond immediate circumstances and consider the long-term consequences of individual and collective choices. The future, according to the text, is shaped gradually through countless small decisions repeated over time. This perspective also explains why the Book of Enoch places such strong emphasis on remembrance. Throughout the manuscript, readers are urged not to forget what earlier generations witnessed, learned, and recorded. Memory becomes a form of protection. A society that remembers its moral foundations is better equipped to recognize corruption when it appears again under a different name. Conversely, when historical memory fades, destructive patterns become easier to repeat because each generation mistakes old mistakes for new discoveries. The preservation of ancient manuscripts itself reflects this principle. Every careful copy produced by a scribe represented an effort to ensure that important teachings would survive beyond the lifetime of a single generation. By the time these themes come together, the Book of Enoch reveals itself as far more than a collection of isolated visions. It becomes a sustained reflection on time, responsibility, justice, and the enduring relationship between divine order and human freedom. Whether read as an ancient religious text, a historical document, or a witness to Second Temple Jewish thought, its central message remains remarkably consistent. Humanity is never portrayed as powerless before history. Instead, each generation is presented with the same enduring choice: to recognize the order woven into creation and live accordingly, or to ignore it until the Koi. As the final sections of the Book of Enoch unfold, the focus shifts from describing the condition of the world to explaining the certainty of accountability. Throughout the text, Enoch returns to the same principle again and again. No action remains hidden forever. Kingdoms rise, powerful rulers leave their mark upon history, and generations pass, believing their decisions will disappear with time. Yet the record endures. According to Enoch, history is not simply remembered by people, it is witnessed before God. Every act of justice strengthens the foundations of future generations, while every act of corruption leaves consequences that extend far beyond the moment in which it occurred. This perspective transforms history from a random sequence of events into a continuous moral record, one in which every generation inherits both the blessings and the failures of those who came before. That idea gives the entire book a remarkable sense of continuity, connecting the earliest chapters of humanity with the hopes placed upon the future. One of the most compelling features of the Book of Enoch is the way it combines warning with hope. Although it describes periods of violence, deception, and widespread injustice, it never concludes that disorder will have the final word. Instead, the text repeatedly points toward restoration. Justice delayed is not justice abandoned. Wrongdoing may appear to prosper for a season, but its apparent success is temporary when measured against the larger course of history. This conviction encouraged ancient communities living through uncertainty and persecution. Their confidence rested not in political power or military strength, but in the belief that truth ultimately outlasts every empire. The manuscript reminds readers that civilizations are temporary, while the standards of righteousness remain unchanged. Generations may forget them for a time, but they do not cease to exist. The survival of the Book of Enoch itself reflects this remarkable resilience. Copied by patient scribes, preserved in monasteries, protected through centuries of conflict, and eventually rediscovered by scholars, the text demonstrates how fragile knowledge can endure against extraordinary odds. Every surviving manuscript represents countless hours of careful work performed by individuals whose names are largely unknown today. They copied fading pages by hand, corrected mistakes, repaired damaged parchment, and passed their work to the next generation with extraordinary dedication. Without their efforts, modern readers would know the Book of Enoch only through brief quotations preserved in other ancient writings. Instead, complete manuscripts remained available, allowing historians to compare traditions across languages and centuries. Their preservation illustrates an enduring truth. History often survives because ordinary people quietly choose to protect it. This legacy also explains why the Book of Enoch continues to attract attention from historians, theologians, archaeologists, and readers around the world. It offers a rare window into the religious imagination of the Second Temple period, illuminating ideas that shaped the intellectual environment surrounding both Judaism and early Christianity. Even where later communities reached different conclusions regarding its canonical status, its historical significance remained undeniable. The text reveals how ancient believers understood divine justice, heavenly order, human responsibility, and the unfolding of history itself. Studying Enoch, therefore, enriches our understanding of the broader world from which many biblical traditions emerged, providing valuable context for questions that continue to inspire discussion today. When the entire manuscript is viewed as a whole, its message becomes surprisingly consistent from beginning to end. It urges readers to observe carefully, remember faithfully, live justly, and recognize that time moves according to an order greater than human ambition. Across centuries of preservation, translation, rediscovery, and scholarship, the Book of Enoch continues to challenge each new generation with the same enduring question, not when history will end, but whether humanity will recognize the significance of the time through which it is already living. Consequences become impossible to deny. As the final sections of the Book of Enoch unfold, the focus shifts from describing the condition of the world to explaining the certainty of accountability. Throughout the text, Enoch returns to the same principle again and again. No action remains hidden forever. Kingdoms rise, powerful rulers leave their mark upon history, and generations pass, believing their decisions will disappear with time, yet the record endures. According to Enoch, history is not simply remembered by people, it is witnessed before God. Every act of justice strengthens the foundations of future generations, while every act of corruption leaves consequences that extend far beyond the moment in which it occurred. This perspective transforms history from a random sequence of events into a continuous moral record, one in which every generation inherits both the blessings and the failures of those who came before. That idea gives the entire book a remarkable sense of continuity, connecting the earliest chapters of humanity with the hopes placed upon the future. One of the most compelling features of the Book of Enoch is the way it combines warning with hope. Although it describes periods of violence, deception, and widespread injustice, it never concludes that disorder will have the final word. Instead, the text repeatedly points toward restoration. Justice delayed is not justice abandoned. Wrongdoing may appear to prosper for a season, but its apparent success is temporary when measured against the larger course of history. This conviction encouraged ancient communities living through uncertainty and persecution. Their confidence rested not in political power or military strength, but in the belief that truth ultimately outlasts every empire. The manuscript reminds readers that civilizations are temporary, while the standards of righteousness remain unchanged. Generations may forget them for a time, but they do not cease to exist. The survival of the Book of Enoch itself reflects this remarkable resilience. Copied by patient scribes, preserved in monasteries, protected through centuries of conflict, and eventually rediscovered by scholars, the text demonstrates how fragile knowledge can endure against extraordinary odds. Every surviving manuscript represents countless hours of careful work performed by individuals whose names are largely unknown today. They copied fading pages by hand, corrected mistakes, repaired damaged parchment, and passed their work to the next generation with extraordinary dedication. Without their efforts, modern readers would know the Book of Enoch only through brief quotations preserved in other ancient writings. Instead, complete manuscripts remained available, allowing historians to compare traditions across languages and centuries. Their preservation illustrates an enduring truth. History often survives because ordinary people quietly choose to protect it. This legacy also explains why the Book of Enoch continues to attract attention from historians, theologians, archaeologists, and readers around the world. It offers a rare window into the religious imagination of the Second Temple period, illuminating ideas that shaped the intellectual environment surrounding both Judaism and early Christianity. Even where later communities reached different conclusions regarding its canonical status, its historical significance remained undeniable. The text reveals how ancient believers understood divine justice, heavenly order, human responsibility, and the unfolding of history itself. Studying Enoch therefore enriches our understanding of the broader world from which many biblical traditions emerged, providing valuable context for questions that continue to inspire discussion today. When the entire manuscript is viewed as a whole, its message becomes surprisingly consistent from beginning to end. It urges readers to observe carefully, remember faithfully, live justly, and recognize that time moves according to an order greater than human ambition. Across centuries of preservation, translation, rediscovery, and scholarship, the Book of Enoch continues to challenge each new generation with the same enduring question: not when history will end, but whether humanity will recognize the significance of the time through which it is already living. The final pages of the Book of Enoch leave the reader with an observation rather than a prediction. Throughout its chapters, the text has consistently pointed back to one central conviction: creation operates according to an order established by God, and humanity is accountable for how it lives within that order. Empires may rise and disappear, languages may change, and entire civilizations may fade into history, yet the principles described in the manuscript remain remarkably consistent. Justice is never presented as temporary. Truth is never portrayed as dependent upon popularity. Wisdom is never measured by power alone. Instead, Enoch encourages every generation to examine its own conduct in light of standards that do not change with political influence or cultural fashion. This perspective explains why the manuscript has continued to attract attention long after many ancient writings were forgotten. It speaks to questions that remain deeply relevant regardless of the century in which they are asked. The remarkable journey of the Book of Enoch itself strengthens that impression. Written in the ancient world, preserved across multiple linguistic traditions, copied through generations of devoted scribes, and partially confirmed by the discoveries among the Dead Sea Scrolls, the text has traveled farther than almost anyone could have imagined. Its survival depended not on a single event, but on countless individual acts of preservation carried out over hundreds of years. Monks working in Ethiopian monasteries, scholars translating difficult manuscripts, archaeologists carefully recovering fragile fragments from desert caves, and historians comparing texts across continents have all contributed to reconstructing the remarkable history of this ancient work. Each generation inherited only part of the picture, Yet together, those efforts have allowed modern readers to encounter a document that once seemed almost lost to history. Perhaps that is one of the manuscript's most enduring lessons. Human knowledge is always incomplete, yet careful investigation gradually reveals a clearer understanding of the past. The rediscovery of ancient manuscripts repeatedly reminds us that history still contains unanswered questions waiting beneath layers of dust, forgotten libraries, and neglected archives. Every new fragment contributes another detail. Every improved translation sharpens our understanding. Every archaeological discovery provides fresh context for interpreting the surviving evidence. The Book of Enoch therefore stands not only as an ancient religious work, but also as an example of how historical research continues to evolve. Rather than closing discussion, each discovery invites further examination, encouraging readers to approach the past with patience, curiosity, and intellectual honesty. The title of this investigation speaks about a silent countdown, and that image becomes meaningful when understood through the larger message of Enoch. The manuscript does not encourage readers to calculate secret dates or search for hidden numerical codes. Instead, it repeatedly portrays history as moving steadily toward accountability. Every passing generation represents another step in that continuing journey. Time advances whether people acknowledge its significance or ignore it. Moral choices accumulate quietly. Character develops gradually. Civilizations are shaped one decision at a time. In that sense, the countdown described by Enoch is less about predicting a specific moment and more about recognizing that every age is responsible for the opportunities placed before it. The warning is therefore deeply practical. Do not waste the time that has been entrusted to you. And so the investigation returns to the same weathered limestone threshold at the entrance of the ancient cave overlooking the Dead Sea. The rough surface still carries the marks of centuries of desert wind. Fine grains of sand continue settling into its narrow cracks with every passing season. Beyond that threshold, hidden manuscripts waited in silence until they were brought once more into the light. The stone is still there, still guarding the entrance, still reminding visitors that history is often preserved in the quietest places. And the Book of Enoch is still there, still being studied, still challenging readers to examine the passage of time, the weight of human responsibility, and the enduring search for truth, exactly as its ancient pages have done for generations.